Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here and welcome to the fourth part of Dirty Chess Tricks to Win Fast. In this lecture, I'm going to show you an interesting line against the Caro-Kann defense. If you don't have any system against the Caro-Kann defense, then I certainly insist you to look at this line in depth because it contains lots of tricks and traps. Now, before we see these tricks, there's a one point I like to mention is, in this video I'm not covering the whole theory. I'm just showing you the tricks exist in this line. So if you have a question like what happens if black does this move, then I strongly recommend you that look at the theory section of this line. So considering all this, let's get started. After e4, the Caro-Kann defense start with the move c6. And the normal move over here for the white is to play the d4, but I'm not recommending that move. Instead of that, I'm recommending the move knight to c3. And after the usual response of the Caro-Kann defense, which is the d4, now white will play the move knight to f3. So you can see I have highlighted by the arrows over here. Mainly, black has three good choices. By the way, the main line is knight to f6, which we are not going to see in this lecture because there's a big theoretical line without any tricks. So you have to study that. But we are certainly looking some nice tricks exist in this moves, and those moves you are going to meet frequently at the club level. So the first move I want to see is the very natural looking the move d4. So attacking the knight, and here white should retrieve the knight to the e2 and attack the d pawn. Now the natural response over here for the black is to play c5, so protecting that pawn. And now once again white will renew the threat of capturing the d4 via the move c3. Now if d captures c3, then knight captures c3 and white position is very fine. But I bet that many of your opponent will think, oh, I can grab more space and hit that knight with the move d3. What's wrong in that? The natural response is when white plays the move knight to f4, which has a double hit to the d3, black can play the move c4, and it looks like black has a very impressive pawn structure early in the game. Well, see yourself, because we have the first trick on the table, which is queen to a4 check. Now, no matter how black responds, for example, whether black plays knight to c6 or bishop to d7, white can capture the c4 pawn. And now the amazing thing is, once the c4 pawn drop, there is no way black can defend the d3 pawn. So for example, the usual line continues with the e6, and after bishop takes d3, just in the opening with under the 10 moves, white is in the winning position. So please watch out for this wonderful trick. Now most likely when you reach this position, your opponent is going to capture the e pawn, and after white recapture, he will churn out this natural looking move, that is bishop to f5. In fact, this is one of the most theoretical move recommended in the Caro-Kann books, but here it's a big mistake, because first of all white can play the move knight to g3 attacking the bishop, and after bishop goes back to g6, now white can play the move h4. So you can see h5 is coming and it will trap the bishop. So again the move recommended from the black perspective is the move h6. The move h6 provides bishop to hide to the h7 square. So after knight to e5, bishop will drop back to the h7. And here comes our second amazing trick, that is queen to h5. So you can see right now white is threatening to checkmate black on f7. So black response is pretty much forced. Black has to play the move g6. So it's attacking the queen, but the downside is this bishop is trapped. And now white has another shot, which is bishop to c4. And especially if you're playing very quick games, this is most likely happen that without much thinking, black straight away capture the queen, which is g cross h5. Afterwards white will simply checkmate black king. So that is one cheap trick exists. Don't expect every time it will happen, but sometimes you will get this. Most of your opponent will spot this and they will likely to play the move e6, so stopping the mate threat, and now white will play the move queen to e2. And you might thought that the trick is over, but no, still the biggest trick is yet to come, because at this position, believe it or not, but somehow black queen has to protect the f7 and no other black piece can move. Let me show you what I mean. Imagine that black plays a random move such as knight to f6. Well, here comes the big shot, because now white can stun the black with the move knight takes f7, and here black has to give up the rook and move out the queen, because if black foolishly capture this knight, then after queen takes e6 check, king to g7 and queen to f7 leads to checkmate. Instead of knight to f6, if your opponent plays bishop to e7, then more or less the same story, because we are going to capture the f7, again hitting the two pieces, and after king recapture we take the e6 with a check, and now white will play a quiet but a very dangerous move, that is knight to e4. I got this position in one of my game, and here my opponent responded with the move queen to d7, so he's desperate to get rid of my queen, but after just one move queen e5, and my opponent realized that he lost a piece. There is no way black can stop white to capture that rook, because if black plays knight to f6, then white can simply capture this knight, because that bishop is pinned and on the top we have a fork. Now at this position, instead of h6, you might think after h5 white doesn't have any tricks left. Well, to give you a surprise, let me show you one of my game which will tell you the story. So here I responded with the move knight to e4, attacking the bishop. Bishop cannot drop backs because the h5 pawn is hanging, so my opponent responded with a natural looking move, that is queen to d6, protecting that bishop. And here I capture that bishop, and after black recapture with the queen, now I played the move bishop to e2. So you can see I'm pressurizing the h5 pawn, and this is one of the big drawback of this line. Well, here black has the only move to protect that pawn, that is the knight to f6. Afterwards I continue with the normal looking move, which is d4, and here black follow the theory with knight b to d7, and after bishop to g5 he played the move e6, which looks very natural because it's freeing up the bishop, but after white's next move probably black will regret his move, and this is most likely happen in your game as well, because I played the move bishop to d3, and more or less queen doesn't have any square, so my opponent has to just give up the knight, and in a way white has a winning position. Now after bishop to f5, and when white plays knight to g3, another move black can try is the move bishop to g4. Against this, white can trick black with this move, which is bishop to c4, because as per the normal theoretical move, that is knight to f6, can be leads to a disaster after bishop cross f7 check, king takes, and knight to e5 check. So forking bishop and the king, and after king goes somewhere, for example let's say e8, then not only white will regain the piece, but white is a clear pawn up where black king lost the castle right. In the second line, after d cross e4 and knight cross e4, black can try this second move, which is knight to d7. Well, against this, if you are very desperate and you know that your opponent is weaker, then you can try out this another cheap trick, that is queen to e2, and after the normal looking move knight to f6 can leads to immediate disaster, because white can play the move knight to d6, and this is a checkmate. Don't laugh, this can be happen, but don't expect too many of them, because most of your opponents spot this. So instead of queen to e2, I recommend over here is you play the move bishop to c4, and this has amazing venom. Whenever I reach this position, probably 50 to 60% of my opponent fall into this trick, so please watch out this. So after bishop to c4, the normal looking move over here is knight to f6, because if now white capture that knight, then black can always regain the knight with another knight. But here white has a fantastic move, which is knight to g5. So hitting the f7, so the only response left is e6, and now white will play the move queen to e2. Now as per the theoretical manual, the only good move over here is knight to d5, but I will give you guarantee most of your opponent will not find this, and instead of that they'll go for this attacking looking move, that is knight to b6. And the funny thing is, if you turn on the engines or any computers, even they are recommending this move. But this cannot be good for black, because after white's next move, that is knight to e5, how the hell black is going to stop knight takes f7? The answer is cannot. The most accurate reply over here is knight captures bishop and queen captures bishop, and after queen to d5, white will simply exchange the queen and then take the free pawn. And no matter how black wriggles over here, those knights can easily come out. So for example, at this point black has to play the move rook to g8, and then white will simply castle on the king side. And you might thought that h6 will nab the knight, but no, white can play the move rook to even check, and after bishop to e7, knight to d6 check, because that bishop is pinned, and let's say king goes to the d7, then white can simply capture the bishop. If now black capture the g knight, then white will capture the bishop. So more or less black has to capture the c knight. Afterwards this knight will come back, and after all the transaction, white is a clear pawn up. Now at this point, instead of knight to b6, if your opponent play the move such as bishop to e7, then this is another big trick, because now white can again go for our old friend, that is knight takes f7. I think you get a hang of this knight to f7, because it leads to a great victory for white. Again, black cannot capture the knight, because if black capture the knight, then queen takes e6. Black cannot go either f8 or e8, so queen has to come out. Afterwards it's a mate in 4. So white will continue with the king to f7 check, and if king goes to the h6, then d4, and the only reply left is g5. Afterwards black will simply capture this pawn, and it's a checkmate. And instead of king to h6, if king goes to the f5, then it's a more funny, because now we are going to play bishop to e6 check, and king has again the only space left, that is f4. Afterwards white will play the move d3, and this is also a checkmate. Last but not least, if your opponent is very aggressive, he might try out this move, which is bishop to g4, but there are some nasty tricks exist in this line as well. Here white will continue with the move h3, black will continue with the move bishop to h5. There is no point of giving up the bishop pair just for nothing, and now white will take the d pawn, and after black recapture, it's time for the bishop check. Now black cannot block this check with the knight to d7, because the d4 pawn drops, so more or less knight c6 is forced. Afterwards white will continue with the move g4, attacking the bishop, and after bishop to g6, white will play the move h4. So you can see now h5 is threatened, so that is a one kind of nuisance for the black. So the most nature looking response over here is the move h6, but now our dirty chess trick start with the move knight to e4. We are pressurizing more on c6 square, which black has to defend with the move rook to c8. Afterwards we are going to play the move queen to f3. So it's a double attack to the d5 pawn, and when black defend this pawn with the move e6, now we have the very amazing trick, that is the move h5. Black will find his horror that he cannot move the bishop, because if the bishop moves anywhere, then queen takes f7 leads to the checkmate. So I hope you enjoy this wonderful tricks. Please feel free to comment on my video, and I'll meet you soon. Bye.